Considering the incredible differences in size and morphology, how Gingrich could have made his claim that Pachycetus was a perfect intermediate, a missing link between land mammals and whales, when its current description is that of a wolf-like animal about 1 to 2 meters long, is frankly astonishing and a testimony to the amount of storytelling commonly involved in the so-called science of evolution. For over 100 years now, a variety of fossil skulls and bones described as missing links between various creatures have been displayed in museums and featured in textbooks in support of the story of evolution. And why are they referred to as missing links? Well, because evolutionists don't seem to find enough fossils to fill all of the spaces in between the various kinds of creatures we know about, i.e., they're missing. Charles Darwin himself considered the weakest link in his entire naturalistic hypothesis to be the lack of fossil evidence for these missing intermediate links, a problem which has never been overcome. Darwin asked a question, then made an admission and a statement, all in one quote, that perfectly sums up the problem. Why then is not every geological formation and every stratum full of such intermediate links? Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain, and this, perhaps, is the most obvious and serious objection which can be urged against the theory. Unfortunately for evolutionists, more than 150 years later, they only have a few handfuls of highly disputed, even amongst their own evolutionary community, transitional forms to point to. So what might then be put out there front and center as solid evidence of a transitional fossil candidate these days? Well, many evolutionists will claim it's been indisputably proven that whales evolved from land animals, and this whole idea came originally from a specimen dubbed Pachycetus, meaning whale of Pakistan. Now, if a teacher randomly threw the name Pachycetus at a student who didn't know about it and asked them to do a report on what it is, the average high schooler would likely hop online and look up some of the top results to prepare their work. However, what they would find wouldn't just be the facts, so to speak. It would be a mixture of facts combined with interpretations of those facts based on evolutionary presuppositions, all wrapped in some heavy storytelling. And what do I mean by that? Well, let me read you a description from the Britannica website describing this creature, and I'm going to modify it by omitting some comments first time around, and then I'll insert them back in the second time to demonstrate the obvious storytelling going on here despite the facts that have been found. Pachycetus, extinct genus of early mammals known from fossils discovered in 48.5 million-year-old river delta deposits in present-day Pakistan. Pachycetus was discovered with functional legs. It has many features of terrestrial mammals, including an auditory system for hearing in air, a dentition not unlike that of its closest relatives, such as the Masonichids, extinct mammals similar in appearance to wolves, and functional feet capable of locomotion on land. The body mass of Pachycetus was estimated at 45 kilograms, roughly the size of a wolf or large dog. The dentition of the animal indicates that it had a diet primarily of fish. However, its skeleton and skull suggest that it spent a considerable amount of time on land. Okay, so along with the artist's rendition provided alongside the description I gave, the student would get a pretty clear understanding of what sort of creature this was. Namely, a land-dwelling, four-legged mammal roughly the size of a wolf that's depicted looking somewhat between a dog and a giant rat. Nowhere in the description would the idea of a whale pop into your mind based on the facts presented. Now, this time, I'm going to present the entire entry verbatim, and I want you to notice all the nuances in phrasing and the way they try to convince you based on assumptions that we'll explore later, to try to sound like this is evidence of a creature transitioning into a whale, which I omitted the first time around. Pachycetus, extinct genus of early cetacean mammals known from fossils, discovered in 48.5 million-year-old river delta deposits in present-day Pakistan. Pachycetus is one of the earliest whales and the first cetacean discovered with functional legs. In addition, it retained many other features of terrestrial mammals, including an auditory system that was better for hearing in air than in water, a dentition not unlike that of its closest terrestrial relatives, such as the mesonychids, and functional feet capable of locomotion on land. The body mass of Pakicetus was estimated at 45 kilograms, roughly the size of a wolf or large dog. The dentition of the animal indicates that it had a diet primarily of fish. However, its skeleton and skull suggest that it spent a considerable amount of time on land. Now, if this whole subject is new to you, you might be thinking, where on earth would they get the idea that this hairy, four-legged land wolf rat creature was some kind of a whale with legs? Why are they saying it's an early whale if it walked around on 4 legs? They say it likely ate fish, but so do bears, and they aren't land whales. Surely there must be something more to it than the facts they're presenting here. Well, let's go through the history of this discovery and explore it in more detail. In 1983, Dr. Phil Gingrich, a whale paleontologist from the University of Michigan, had an article published in Science magazine purporting a monumental evolutionary discovery where he claimed his find, Pakicetus, is the oldest and most primitive whale yet discovered. It is an important transitional form, linking Paleocene carnivorous land mammals and later, more advanced marine whales. Supposedly based on the fossil evidence he'd found, the magazine cover featured a rather goofy-looking drawing depicting a half-land, half-sea creature diving into the water to hunt fish. And yet, how much physical evidence had he collected that would inspire such a depiction? Well, the only bits of bone he'd then collected were a few pieces of the skull. He had absolutely no fossil evidence below the head. Now, think about this. If the drawing was supposedly based on the facts he'd had at the time, how could he possibly know what the diet of the creature supposedly was? Or how to get an artist, if you could call them that, to draw the entire creature, complete with front legs and flipper-like feet? And yet, despite not having close to a complete skeleton of the creature, a full 11 years later, Gingrich was still so taken with his own imagination that he was still declaring, in time and in its morphology, Pakicetus is perfectly intermediate, a missing link between earlier land mammals and later full-fledged whales. Now, remember, there was nothing in the bits of skull he'd found that would definitively indicate this creature operated in water. No blowhole or nostril on the top of it, nothing indicating it had ears that were designed for use in aquatic environments, etc. And yet he spoke so confidently about his discovery and had all of this published in prestigious, peer-reviewed scientific journals. However, by 2001, nearly 20 years after his initial announcement in Science magazine, almost the whole skeleton was finally uncovered. And what did it show? Well, a technical paper in Nature unequivocally declared that the bones demonstrated Pakicetus was a land animal, and no more amphibious than a tapir, which is a pig-like creature. The Encyclopedia of New Zealand website depicted the creature with muscle and skin in the following way, which is fairly similar to most depictions shown today. Now, let's take a look at a whale for a moment and compare these two creatures. Considering the incredible differences in size and morphology, how Gingrich could have made his claim that Pakicetus was a perfect intermediate, a missing link between land mammals and whales, when its current description is that of a wolf-like animal about 1 to 2 meters long, is frankly astonishing and a testimony to the amount of storytelling commonly involved in the so-called science of evolution. And had the complete skeleton been uncovered and shown to the scientific community and the general public from the outset, claims of what are now commonly referred to as terrestrial cetaceans, literally land whales, would almost surely have been metaphorically laughed out of town. I mean, one can look up the dictionary definition of whale and find the following. Whale, noun, a very large marine mammal with a streamlined hairless body, a horizontal tail fin, and a blowhole on top of the head for breathing. And yet, there was never any indication of any of these features. Marine-dwelling, hairless, tail fin, blowhole for breathing, etc. found from the earliest days in 1983 all the way to 2001, while Pakicetus was being researched. However, in schoolrooms, colleges and universities, museums, zoos, or aquariums, as well as in textbooks, online articles, and peer-reviewed journals, such claims are greeted with serious nods of acceptance and thought of as scientifically legitimate. Charts showing wolf-like land animals whose feet morph into webbed and then flipper-like feet, which then gradually lose their hind limbs and grow fins and flukes, while their nostrils shift from the front to the top of their heads, are now seen as proof positive of the once missing links between land animals and whales. And they are taught and illustrated using a lineage of supposed transitional creatures, beginning with Pakicetus all the way to true whales we see today, which seems similar to how the old and now totally debunked horse evolution series found its way into many other publications and textbooks for over 150 years. You see, evolutionists constantly need new proofs to prop up their worldview. So while the horse evolution series was falling off the back end of the evolutionary conveyor belt, the whale fossil series was just being assembled and placed at the front of it. And evolutionists now show diagrams to students with all sorts of supposed intermediates between Pakicetus and true whales to make the evidence seem truly robust. And yet, just like Pakicetus, when closely examined, each and every one of these supposed missing links absolutely fails to qualify as a true transitional form upon inspection. They fail just like the #1 argument I hear over and over again from evolutionists that push this whale evolution nonsense fails. And that is, why do whales have vestigial leftover legs if they didn't evolve from land animals? What use would hind legs have been to whales? Well, while it's true that modern whales are often described in evolutionary textbooks as having vestigial hip bones, which they say used to anchor legs, and this is often touted as proof of the whale evolution series, they've never found actual legs in whales of any kind, vestigial or otherwise. What they find are pelvic bones that perform a specific purpose. And a 2014 article in the journal Evolution confirmed that there's a perfectly designed and critical function involved in the need for whales' pelvic bones after all: procreating. Without their pelvic bones, they'd all be dead, which means there's no evidence they are vestigial in any true sense at all. I hope this brief dive into just one of the many evolutionary arguments out there has been beneficial in showing you just how weak most of them truly are when stripped down. Christians should be aware of the illegitimate debate tactic known as elephant hurling. Perhaps in this case we should call it whale hurling. Often heard when evolutionists declare statements like, "The evidence for evolution is so overwhelmingly strong that I just can't understand how any intelligent person doesn't believe it." However, hurling the elephant is simply a bluff. And there's a reason why circumstantial evidence in a courtroom is given little weight. And in a case where such circumstantial evidence is simply piled on top of another in an attempt to sound robust, it's typically deconstructed rather soundly by an experienced opponent, because such evidence is usually strung together with much imaginative storytelling. And you've likely noticed that I use the phrase "the story of evolution" when talking about the materialist's origin account. And I do that very specifically because that's what it is. It's a made-up story that says land animals turned into whales over millions of years. And it's not so much that I'm surprised, although I'm disappointed, when the world gets sucked into believing these things. It's when I see brothers and sisters in Christ get caught up in accepting these stories that are in complete contradiction to the Word of God that I become grieved, because I